Hello and welcome to Studies in Theatre MOOC course. Students, today we are going to discuss post-colonial theatre in India. As you can see, the name indicates post-colonial theatre, which means theatre that emanated with the spirit of post-colonial intervention. And I must also clarify this does not include simply the theatre culture that came after 1947, because this is a thematic adjective that we are using to signify post colonialism. In introductory aspects of post colonial theatre, what you can see is that it has a very strong historical context. In the wake of the British colonialism that lasted for more than 2 centuries, India eventually gained independence in 1947, but the colonial system had impacted Indian society in all ways, and the cultural aspect as well included theatre practice. So, what you see in the post colonial theatre, there is a lot of cultural hybridity. It integrates the elements from indigenous performance traditions such as classical dance, music, and folk theatre with Western theatrical forms introduced during the colonial period. In addition to this kind of theater is definitely centering on the representation of identity and representation. Playwrights, directors, performers, they are exploring themes related to caste, religion, gender, and ethnicity, seeking to challenge dominant narratives and reclaiming marginalized voices in performance space. In addition to this, translation became a very active paradigm of post colonial performance spheres. The linguistic diversity of India is reflected in this theatre, where the performance is taking place in multiple languages and translation also being done of one play into various languages. So, this facilitates the exchange of ideas and narratives. The political engagement of post colonial theatre is a marked feature. It serves as a platform, the theatre serves as a platform for dissent, protest, advocacy, and challenging the oppressive power structures, advocating for the rights of the marginalized communities. So in order to assimilate all these kinds of diverse associations, obviously what will we lead to? We will lead to experimentations, and alongside theatrical forms, Indian post-colonial theatre embraces experimentation and innovation techniques. It also is globally influenced, uh, in the aspect of the fact that the global interventions in theater spaces are touching the post-colonial theater space of India also. A lot of evolution has happened in the post-independence phase, because in the Indian theater since 1947, it remains on the margins of contemporary world theater, despite the fact that a lot of changes have taken place in our theater culture. It has not been able to become one of the strong tropes of discussion in the tapestry of world theater narrative. But we have lot to talk about despite that. The linguistic plurality, as I mentioned, and the challenges of historicization that have not been there. So they need to be overcome. And new forms of drama and experimental performances that are emerging since 1950s, they are also giving a new identity to this evolution. Now, if you look at the 1950s and 60s decade, that was the immediate aftermath of independence in Indian theatre, and it predominantly focused on realism and social engagement. Playwrights and directors addressed issues such as poverty, inequality, social injustice, drawing inspiration from various kinds of ideals and movements and leaders of the freedom movement. And notable playwrights in this age were in this topic are Vijay Tendulkar, Mohan Rakesh, Badal Sarkar. Their plays are critiqued for their societal norms, that they critique, that they criticize, and they advocate the social change. Then, when we move towards 60s and 70s, we can see the rise of experimental theater movement in India, and groups like Indian People's Theatre Association and Theatre Group in Delhi. These were dabbling with form and content, incorporating elements of Brechtian theatre, absurdism, and folk traditions. Directors like Ibrahim Al-Qazi, Satyadev Dubey, they played instrumental roles in shaping the trajectory of Indian experimental theatre, at the same time challenging the conventional norms but not rejecting them, but imbibing them in such a way that they became more potent to express the angst of the modern man of India, the newly created Indian nation. In addition to this, there are so many regional theatre cultures that have been revived in post independence scenario. There was a resurgence of regional theatre across the nation's length and breadth, uh, because of linguistic freedom and because of the desire to reclaim indigenous spirits in performance traditions, and also to document the regional performance flavor. States like Kerala, West Bengal, Maharashtra, Karnataka, they witnessed vibrant theatre scenes with emergence of playwrights like G. Shankar Pillai in Malayalam, Vijay Tendulkar in Marathi, Girish Karnad in in Kannada language, and many more. The list is long. Of course, you need to research these aspects and you need to add these lists with more names. Then, when we look at the new kind of names and the terms that have been added to this list of discussion are political theater, street plays, especially in 1970s and early 80s. It saw the proliferation of political theater and street plays as a means of grassroots mobilization and consciousness raising, in order to fight against various kinds of ideas and issues that were uh, plaguing the common man of India, like corruption, lack of jobs, unemployment, and the divide between the society, the different groups of society. So groups like Jan Natya Manch, Janam in Delhi and Jan Natya Manch in West Bengal, they use theatre as a tool for social and political activism. And street theatre emerged as a very powerful medium for reaching out to diverse audience, addressing issues such as corruption, communalism, and gender inequality. And students, you remember that I have already discussed street theatre in detail as a separate genre of theatre culture, and I touched upon various playwrights from India in that lecture. I hope you have listened to that lecture. Otherwise, you can also will revisit in the light of the present discussion. Now, the commercial theater was also taking very, you can say small steps, but yes, there was a beginning of commercial theater, and the performance industry that is centered in Bombay or Mumbai, that was also giving some kind of impetus to the performance spaces in theater. Commercial theater started flourishing in cities like Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, Delhi, and commercial productions drew inspiration from Bollywood films, incorporating song and dance sequences, melodramatic narratives to cater to popular tastes. And some playwrights like Vijay Tendulkar, Satyadev Dubey, whom I've already named, they were experimenting with commercial theatre forms as well, while retaining a critical equilibrium or critical edge, challenging the mainstream conventions from within the genre of theatre. Then there are some contemporary trends available right now. In recent decades, we have seen that Indian theatre has continued to evolve, embracing digital intervention, interdisciplinary collaborations, international exchanges, and playwrights and directors are exploring a wide range of themes and styles, blending tradition and modern influence to reflect the complexities of the present day society. And theater festivals, workshops, cultural exchange programs, they are contributing a lot to the dynamism and diversity of Indian theater scene these days, fostering dialogue and innovation across regional, national, and global contexts. I myself have been able to experience this kind of dynamism in the recent decades when I could get opportunities to participate in various international conferences of theater research, which gave us the different ideas of how to research into this field, and then we have been able to document certain things that are very crucial for sustenance of the Indian cultural tradition, especially in the theater culture in India. Then the influences on Indian theatre are many. But before I move on to this, I must make an important mention. When we talk of post independence theatre, we must not forget one thing, and that is the establishment of some academies, the public sector academies in Delhi, like National School of Drama, Sangeet Natak Academy. These were very important centers that initiated the attention of the masses towards the fact that theater is some kind of a serious paradigm, and it needs to be practiced in an academic manner also, because these societies, these institutes, they offer training on different aspects of drama in order to create actors, producers, directors, uh, designers, stage designers, sound designers, and other kinds of artists who are participating in the making of a theater production. In addition to that, Sangeet Natak Academy also helps to make us understand that music and dance are also something that need to be modernized in their method of performing. That is one thing, but also in how to pursue them as academic disciplines, because training in Indian dance and training in Indian music exists in India across the country in traditional method. There is a separate system of going to a guru and then living there and attaining that kind of a training for some years or for some months. It depends from one art form to the other. But despite that, these two systems, these two institutes looked to modernize the education system of performance culture, and they have made an indelible mark on the impact of academic resolution that is visible, and they have produced brilliant actors, and they have also led to research and collaborations with international institutes and societies. And this also sometimes become a matter of assessing out how governments are supporting the art and culture in a particular scenario. So moving on to the discussion that I was earlier talking, and that is the different kinds of influences that have been there on Indian theater. That they include European theater, they include the traditional theater of India, indigenous performance traditions of India. And when we say India, it appears to be a political country, the political map of India comes to our mind, the map that we see today. But it's the subcontinent that we should think about, because it's not one performance tradition is not limited to only one political region or one part of the country or one part of South Asia. It is in many countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal. These countries have various things which are common to each other. So today we can call that there have been influences from other countries, for example, our neighboring countries. Now, let us look at the challenges and complexities that are there, because this is the most important aspect. And students, instead of simply going on and on about how good Indian post independent theater is, or how much powerful, or because you find this kind of discussion in so many books and so many available researches. My focus is to highlight those gaps which deserve the attention of students and researchers, and probably you can pick up some threads from here and try to address them in your writings and in your research work, in your field work, and take them forward in order to benefit the performance spaces of India. The first thing is commercialization and funding, one of the major challenges in the post independent India theater, because often, you need to prioritize profit over artistic merit when commercialization is there. and limited funding and support for non-commercial or experimental theater, it increases this challenge or intensifies this challenge. It makes it difficult for independent artists and theater groups to sustain themselves. So this is one important thing. And I know that this is a kind of a challenge that has always been there as far as the issue of theater and arts are concerned, but we need to constantly address it. Then the aspect of language and accessibility, because India's linguistic diversity poses a challenge for theater practitioners. It is, only looked at as a power, as a strength, the diversity of India in terms of linguistics. But we also should understand that the attention span of audience and the theater lovers and enthusiasts, it gets divided. There is nothing like national consciousness for theater culture, and it can never be there because there are so many linguistic cultures and so many theater cultures in our country. There are so many officially recognized languages, and there are dialects in which performance spaces are available. So there is a need for translation, more and more translation, and more multilingual performers who have the knowledge of more than one or two languages. Then censorship and freedom of expression. This is a question that is visible in various discussions time and again, and we keep talking about it a lot. And then infrastructure and facilities. This is a very important thing, and that is why, when you see that the course like this that I'm doing for theater, I feel that this is an important juncture through which I am able to communicate to people living in the far off corners of India, far flung corners of India, and where they don't have theater space, theater culture, but they have desire and enthusiasm. So, how can we have innovations, and how can we fight with the lack of infrastructure and facilities? We need to create more and more context and more discussion around these kind of issues. Rural areas, for example, how can you prioritize a theater space when the basic amenities are not available to people there? Because then theater becomes a privilege. So, how can we resolve these things? These are the questions, these are the challenges. The next aspect is representation and inclusivity. Despite efforts to promote diversity and inclusivity, Indian theatre still grapples with the issue of representation, particularly regarding caste, gender, and marginalized communities. So, many productions continue to be dominated by privileged voices, even now, while marginalized voices often struggle to be heard or represented authentically on stage. So, representation is one thing, but authentic representation is another thing. We cannot have representation just for stereotypes or just for tokenism. We need to look at our situation and understand that are we true to this whole idea of representation of marginalized and representation of downtrodden as far as the theater space is considered, because as it is we see in cinema, it is a very badly addressed paradigm. We have been creating stereotypes of different kinds of people in different religions, different communities, different genders. So we are not faring very nicely in this department. I think we need to have an introspective understanding of the situation, and it is us who can make a difference, the insiders only. We don't need a treatment or some kind of solution from outside. We have to brainstorm our situation and continue to working towards the better representation of the marginalized and make inclusive theater more and more. Digitalization and changing audience preferences is a department where theater concerns are missing out, because theater community sometimes is not very well connected to the facilities where they can keep themselves updated and having feedback from various departments from so that they can have audience awareness, they know what are the different trends. So this also needs to be addressed. Other than this, homogenization in the wake of globalization is a big problem, because There is always this attraction of writing a play or creating a production around a theme which is doing good in the entire world, so why not we also do it? And then we end up in this trap of homogeneity where we get represented the way anybody else is getting represented. So heterogeneity needs to be celebrated, not homogeneity. So, after these challenges and complexities, look at these historical perspectives, because these perspectives give us the understanding to look for the solutions that are available. Because the 200-year history of modern urban theatre in India, it shows us that there is an interpenetration of Indian and European theatrical representation, classical tradition, modern styles, provincial and metropolitan influences. So much has already existed. It is there to make us understand that how we can work for the solutions. In addition to this, modern Indian theatre initially borrowed organizational structures and performance conventions from Europe, but quickly integrated into the complex cultural landscape with long standing theatrical traditions in indigenous languages. Then the colonial period that impacted Indian theatre has, the traveling troops of Western theatre, like Shakespeare's theatre, they would come to India because the British would like to entertain themselves with their theatre. They came. Then the textbooks were also being taught in schools where missionaries were there, and those textbooks also had plays in English. They were being propagated. Then a lot of capital was invested in the urban proscenium theaters because of the influence and glamour of touring companies influencing the Bombay's Parsi community. And you can see that I have devoted an entire discussion on Parsi theatre culture in a separate lecture, because that is a very important foundational paradigm of Indian performance space. In addition to this, the making of the new urban that took place in Indian the colonial period, that influenced the post-colonial period of India and post-colonial theatre culture of India, because it intervened actively in colonial contests of power, reflecting colonial histories of exploitation and domination. So the narratives that were happening, that were available in the big cities, the political events and political action that was there, that created theatre cultures, and that carried on even after the independence. Moreover, Indian playwrights, directors, performers, cultural theorists, and critics have engaged in a polemic that problematizes the relation between cultural modernity, contemporaneity, aesthetics, and politics of representation. So, this has given a lot of solidification to the depth and profundity of spectrum of Indian performance. And because contemporariness, cultural modernity, the beauty of the play, the aesthetics, and the politics of representation, they have all been questioned by different directors, different playwrights in order to create their own version of interpretation. And there have been several debates to revive the pre-colonial traditions, that is like Sanskrit tradition, then Dastan Goi, Qissa Goi, these kinds of pre-colonial traditions and proponents of syncretistic modernity, internationalism, cosmopolitanism, they have shaped the post-colonial, post-independent urban theatre in India. So all in all, the influences are very vibrant. The influences are from within, the influences are from outside, and these influences have also evolved over the period of time, especially in last 200 years, and that is visible in Indian theatre culture a lot. There is a challenge in the scholarly recognition of India's theatre productions. This is an issue that that is somewhat present because of, I believe, the lack of academic attention, lack of the research based attention towards the theatre culture, towards the performance culture. International scholarship and criticism have failed to recognize the complex formation of post independence Indian theatre due to misplaced critical emphasis. I believe that this is something that needs to be understood, because there's so many vernacular or regional theater traditions are there, that the discussions that take place in conferences and meetings and international scenarios, they somehow feel their job done only by visiting the big universities in big cities. And that is a very good thing, but that should be extended. This facility and this approach, this outreach should be extended to the far flung areas as well. And there is also a problem of this westernized gaze when the researchers travel in for field work into the far-flung areas, and they document the different kinds of things about artists and indigenous performers and theater practices. So that gaze issue is also there, and that becomes a binding in looking at the achievements of our theater practices in a very westernized way. And in that sense we are not able to somehow be at par with the European theater practice and other kinds of theater practices. So this is about the issues. Now let us look at some of the playwrights. I will continue this discussion into another lecture as well, but for now I'm taking the examples of only a couple of playwrights so that you can have some idea of what I was talking about in the form of the concrete examples. For example, Girish Karnad. His play Tughlaq in 1964 is a very well known play, and it is one of the most acclaimed plays in India. And the theater that has developed around this play is immense. It is also an academic text, it is research text, and it is very widely performed text. As you know, the name of Tughlaq represents the 14th century Sultan of Delhi, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and through this character, Karnad examines the complexity of power, governance, human ambition, resonating with contemporary socio political contexts. The plot is set during the 14th century, and the central character is depicted as an enigmatic character. And he has on at one place to deal with the lofty ideals that he has, and on one hand he has the harsh realities of governance. He is torn in between, and he has a grand vision for reform that includes the introduction of new currency, the shifting of the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, and the imposition of heavy taxes to finance his military campaigns. So, this play provides a very interesting example of how history has been revisited by a modern playwright. And that episode of history is not only appearing documented in this play, but it also appears contextualized in the present day reality, juxtaposed with the issues and problems of the governance administration of the contemporary rulers when this was written, this play. So, power and idealism, political ambition and hubris, and things like uh, identity and belonging. These are the hallmark identifications of this play. Another text is Vijay Tendulkar's Ghashi Ram Kotwal, which is celebrated for its bold and provocative plays. This play has so much talked about that every time we talk of Indian theatre, this is the first text that comes to our mind. And you know that the play is set in the city of Pune during the rule of the Peshwas, who were prime ministers of the Maratha Empire. And the play revolves around the character of Ghashi Ram, who was a Brahmin who rises to power. So he was from the lesser social strata, higher caste, but rose to powerful position as the Kotwal, that is the chief officer of Pune. And then the story of corruption and power greed that follows, that unfolds in the entire play, is a very enigmatic, very fascinating depiction of how the Peshwas and how their people, how the oppression and violence of the different kinds of people in the city, it all represents realities of modern world. But again I will say that more than its because any play written in any time frame speaks about its present, even if it is written about past. But more important contribution of plays like these is the fact that Indian playwrights were no more looking for plots to write about and the structural frameworks to write about from outside, that is in European texts. They are writing about the text and storylines of the present times, of the historical time frame of India. And that is a very important shift in Indian theatre post independence. Then Mahesh Elkunchwar's play Vadachi Rebandi, written in 1971, again is a poignant exploration of a family dynamics, societal norms, and personal identity. Because Mahesh Elkunchwar is known for his exploration of contemporary social and psychological issues. And this play was performed first in 1979, written in earlier, and it is also translated as Old Stone Mansion. It is talking about a family that gathers to mourn the patriarch's death, and there are tensions that emerging over the division of property, the future of family business, and the changing atmosphere because of modernity and individual aspirations of different family members. So there is a clash between different kinds of sections of the family, the aspirations of people, the individual and the institution of societies. So this is a very significant representation of Indian society, its hypocrisy, its mundaneness, its palpability, and how this play becomes somewhat, if you want to compare it, you can find these kinds of stories in a lot of soap operas, but that's not what Mahesh Elkunchwar does in the play. He makes it a very thought provoking and intense representation of generational divide, tradition versus modernity, familial dynamics, identity and belonging, and overall a social critique of the entire Indian middle class living in small cities and living in big cities, but in small localities, so called small localities. So that is how this plays. So what I've given you this idea of through these three plays, that how different kinds of playwrights in post-colonial India, in post-independence theatre, are looking to document, looking to represent, looking to embody the sensibilities, tension, psychological issues, and trauma through representation of dramatic language, historical context, as well as plot lines that are very Indian, yet they can reach out to global audience if they are taken in the right way, they are addressed in the right way. So this is what I have to talk about this particular topic, that is Indian theatre. In my other discussions on the similar topic, I will give you more information. These are the sources that I have referred to. I hope you have enjoyed this lecture. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the different lecture.